Okay, in this video, we're going to look at maturity and immaturity, why people are so immature today, maybe why you're so immature, why I'm so immature. What does that mean? What does it mean? That's what we're going to look at. What exactly does it mean? I'm going to break it down because there's a few different components, some of which aren't obvious, how it shows up and what to do about it. Sound good? Okay. So what do I mean by immaturity? So there's a few aspects to this. Yeah, and I speak from my own experience as someone who's been pretty immature their whole life by many people's assessment, despite being pretty bright. So it's not really about intelligence, and it's not so much about even, we could say, like cognitive maturity, what's called developmentally. So look at developmental psychology, Suzanne Cook-Greta, Robert Cuban, Ken Wilber summarizes a lot of it. People grow through these different stages, and that doesn't actually stop throughout life. So we could be talking about developmental maturity, and that is an aspect of it. In my case, I think many people's, it's not the key one. So in developmental maturity, subject becomes object. We have increasingly ability to be abstraction, increasing complexity of thought. That is part of maturity. And if someone doesn't have that, we wouldn't regard them as a sort of mature leader in some ways. But I don't actually think it's the critical one for what I want to talk about today. So what else am I talking about? Another aspect of it is emotional intelligence. So certain emotional intelligence skills just aren't present today. Or why not? We're going to get into. So self-awareness, it's not mature if people aren't aware of their emotions, right? I'm not angry, someone that doesn't know their own state. That can be trained. People can get better at that. The key one, however, I see in terms of emotional maturity is lack of self-regulation. So if you think of a toddler, kids and babies, they're good at many things, but they're rubbish at this. A 2-year-old, if they don't get what they want, will have a tantrum. They'll hold their breath. They'll throw themselves on the floor in the supermarket because they couldn't get that chocolate bar from mum. You've all seen it. Every time I see it, I buy condoms. It's a nightmare. And that shouldn't last too many, into sort of 2, 3, 4. It shouldn't, after that, what they call toddler or terrible twos, it shouldn't last too long. And if it does, as it increasingly does now, we worry. So actually this happened to my niece, who had quite a traumatic early start to life, no throw off my sisters, and she was displaying these kind of tantrum behaviors like much later in life. And that's when my sister was like, right, maybe we need to bring in outside help and, get her some support. She's doing well now. Well done, Marianne. But that was a red flag for us. It was a worry because it's like, hey, that she shouldn't be having these tantrums at this age. And actually I see that increasingly going into adulthood. Like people say it's this road rage or this kind of rage, or the activist who's screaming at the moon. The sort of lack of ability to regulate oneself. It's particularly unappealing in men. It's classically sort of masculinity was seen as almost being defined by being cool, calm and collective. Think of James Bond, whatever happens, he's cool, Clint Eastwood, whatever. Old school kind of masculine heroes. They didn't get phased easily. And you'll still see this. This is where guys are constantly ribbing each other and giving each other shit because they're trying to, like, on an unconscious level, train each other not to have strong emotional reactions to everything. Because you can't trust someone if they do that. You need people that keep their head when there's an emergency, when things go down. So this has always been a virtue. And increasingly I see it's not just sort of kids that have problems, though many, many kids and teenagers now do, as a result of decadence, which I'll come into, but also just adults. And it's kind of pathetic, isn't it? So actually what maturity is, because when you see immaturity, it's kind of gross. You kind of go, yeah, really? Really? There's that feeling that it just doesn't feel right, appropriate. It doesn't look wholesome. You get it. And often, women, when I will experience it in men as unattractive, that's another kind of indicator you'll see. And one of the biggest complaints I have actually from female students and colleagues is, where are all the good men? Where are all the good men? It's like, because what they want is men, not boys, particularly if they've got kids or they want kids. Then they don't want another child, So that lack of maturity shows up in this way emotionally. Sometimes it's lack of empathy as well. And of course, that leads to sort of less leadership skills in terms of being more charismatic, being a better influencer. But that self-regulation piece is key. A decadent society, remember, you've seen my other videos, I hope. A decadent society, people are not well regulated from the community. So they're not co-regulated, they're not eco-regulated because that connection with nature's gone. They're not theo-regulated because that connection with meaning has gone. they're not regulated by the culture, because a decadent society doesn't believe in itself as a culture. In fact, it's self-hating. Plus, it's disrupted the community. It offers addictive pleasures instead of wholesome ones. Addictive pleasures will usually make your self-regulation worse. Okay, I say this as someone who's 17 years sober now. Yes, essentially, it's like the years of drinking. I was drunk for 10 years, basically, on pretty much daily basis. And you emotionally have arrested development at that point. And I was like, what was I? 16, 17 when I started drinking alcoholically. So, your emotional development isn't finished at 16, 17, 25, 30 maybe before the self-regulation is really good in most people. So I've been kind of catching up with that, And certainly in the first few years of sobriety, when I didn't have yet the skills and the maturity of that skill, which I've started to develop now, took me a while. Yeah, so it feels like I'm judging you if you think, oh, I'm mature. Like, I've been there, I get it. People like even in the early years of sobriety would look at me and just go like, Mark, why are you freaking out about that? And I was learning centering, and I was doing martial arts to learn, to sort of improve the self-regulation skills, to get that up to speed, and that really helped. There's ways to learn these skills that our culture won't teach us. In a culture without hardships, we have to deliberately do those things. Like a couple of hours ago, you just had an ice bath, and it's like, oh, you don't want to get out. No, I'm going to stay in there. Okay, 5 minutes are up. Now I can get out. 5 minutes these days. It's not too bad. So we do need to learn those self-regulatory skills. That is part of emotional maturity. So that's one aspect of it. There's a few more aspects of it, though, other than that. So how can I put this? The moving into a stage of life where you put away childish things. So when you see a 35-year-old guy in East London on a scooter, dressed like a clown, and he's worried about his computer game or this, you just sort of go, mate, there's real battles out there. There's literally a war in Ukraine if you want to man up that way. There's real things that need work, and your family need you, and it's just not, life's not easy. This sort of extended childhood is ridiculous. And again, it's unattractive and disgusting, untrustworthy for men, attractive to women. In women, it's also putting off babies, basically. It's putting off children. 35-year-old students who are just thinking about having kids and like, good luck. I hope you can now. Yeah, I hope you can. Because you're not so fertile. I think the statistics are only 50% are likely to have kids after 30. So it's way sooner than people think, Yeah, so putting off any kind of taking responsibility. So what is the solution to maturity on this level? It's taking responsibility. It's caring about something more than yourself. So for me, it was a business. That definitely helped. As soon as I got a team, that really helped. I'm responsible for a team of people, their income, these people I care about. That's a big deal. Yeah. Being responsible for more than yourself, taking on responsibility is a big one. Having a child is obviously a huge one for many people. And as someone without children at 43, I actually have, come to the conclusion of like, God, that's so immature. There's just a ridiculousness to that. There's an unnaturalness to that. All my ancestors had kids before, pretty much all of them, by the time they were 25, right? Definitely by the time they were 30. My parents thought they were leaving it a bit late when they were 28, 29 to have kids, when they started having kids, like my sister then me. So there's an immaturity to that, just delaying the process of having children, which is, again, decadent cultures are self-destructive. One aspect of that is that they don't breed. They really are they're on a path to suicide. But delaying children and not encouraging that culturally or economically is part of a decadent society. So that is definitely an aspect of immaturity. It's one I still feel like I have, even as an uncle, and I, help other people's kids, but I still like, I'm looking for ways to sort that out. Anyway, so there's the one about kids. So, but in terms of like not doing childish things, many cultures, that's actually just cut off at like 14, 15, maybe 18, normally before that. It's like, you can't play with toys, right? And when I see boys playing with toys, I just sort of think, really? Like I go to some hippie festivals sometimes. I like doing hippie stuff like conscious dance and yoga. And someone will have like a crystal ball and they'll be like waving it around their hand. And they've spent hundreds of hours getting good at this crystal ball or hula hoop or fire hoops or something. And I just think, why? Why? You could have learned a language, you could have started a business, you could have done all sorts of stuff, you know? And you've got good at a little crystal ball or a little hoop or something, and you go, well, I'm not hurting anyone. And there is this sort of critique of like, well, it's good to be playful. And I agree. I'm actually one of the more playful people you'll meet. Most people who know me would say I'm very playful as a person. If you ever see me teach, it's very playful. I'm playful with my friends, just I'm a playful guy. However, that is something you occasionally do as an adult. That is something, you know, you might have some playtime. And of course, like, you know, I could say, yeah, all my life's play, and on some level that's true, all my work is play. But it's not childish. Sometimes being childlike, yes, can be a relief from being a grown-up, you know, playing around with your partner or playing around with kids, and, you know, there's various different flavours of that, right? But it's childlike sometimes, not childish, you know? And it's just sort of not good enough. It's like there's things in the world that need doing. It's like the world needs the grown-up, fully mature version of you. It doesn't need this twat who's fucking learning firepoint or whatever it is. If you're into firepoint, don't be offended. You know, we can all have a hobby. You know, sometimes it's nice to do childish things, I get it, but not really. Not as our main activity. So it's childlike activities, lack of robustness, you know, again, it's related to self-regulation. Just most guys aren't very manly, are they? Like most people I look at, and there's sort of fat boys, yeah, fat, like 45-year-old boys. And see this when you see hedonism and you see people kind of trying to self-initiate. I think I mentioned this in another video. I was on a plane to Tallinn. I was doing some work with Ukrainian refugees there, and on the plane was just these middle-aged drunk guys from England, and they just looked pathetic, just chubby. It's like that sort of bravado, but underneath it a lot of insecurity. And that is the thing you see actually is on the surface is either aggression or bravado, or it's like, let's party, but it's not real happiness. It's not very deep. I should have probably said this earlier, but a lot of this goes back to this lack of initiation in the West. I mean, one of the main things we're doing in what's called the Palestra project is initiating people into Western culture, because this is a key thing. And a lot of people coming to us are in their 20s, but some are older because they know they still need that initiation. And you know, traditional cultures, this was just normal. It's still normal in some, like, you know, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, things like that. In Jewish tradition, you'll still see some versions of it, but there needs to be some initiation where you're extracted from childhood, men away from women usually, for example. Some kind of extreme hardship normally, surviving that confrontation with death, and then you're with the men at that point. If it's a guy, women with the women. Yeah, some people say onset of puberty in women, and onset of periods, menarche does that for women. Certainly having kids seems to do it much more for women. You know, obviously the experience of childbirth is, firstly, the first time for a lot of women is pretty hardcore. You know, for me, I had a initiation through martial arts, and I had a lot of older men supporting me, doing my black belt. It was kind of a big deal. You know, that was a sort of an attempt at initiation on one level. I think I had another level last year when I was doing work in Ukraine, and I just went, wow, you know, life is serious, and to devote oneself to something that really matters, that where there's, you know, lives on the line. I was doing psychological work there, just to be clear, for the record. And, you know, even that quite low level I was working at, wasn't on the front lines or in Bakhmut or something, but even that was initiatory, and I wasn't quite the same afterwards. And I looked at my relationships differently afterwards, and my work differently afterwards. And people were saying, you know, you seem to have more depth now, or people trusted me who didn't trust me before. Yeah. So that's one way to kind of, you know, do it for guys fighting in a war. And you'll see young men. I actually met young men from England who are on the plane I was on to go to Ukraine now. Like, they wanted to fight, they wanted to help, you know, very beautiful urge, kind of heroic journey. In some ways naive, but, you know, they were good guys, young guys, just wanting to help. And, you know, they could see they wanted to fucking get real. They wanted to get real. So when people don't have that, they tend to try and self-initiate through dangerous behaviors, through drinking or drugging. And again, in a decadent culture, there's just hedonism there. I was walking by this bar the other day, quite near to where I live, and there's guys standing outside in their late 30s. And I just looked at them and I was just like, time to grow up. You know, like if you're 18, you're, you know, getting lagered with the boys, you know, at university for the first time or whatever. It's like, I get it. I don't judge that. but it's time to grow up. It really is time to grow up. So I think maturity comes through through initiation, through the confrontation with death in various ways. It could be kind of spiritual death, kind of, very severe meditation retreats have also been initiatory for me in some ways, I would say. Emotional maturity, giving up hedonistic, what used to be called vices. It's such an old-fashioned word now, but I think it's still critical. Giving up vices, accepting responsibility, taking on responsibility, putting things on your shoulders like a business or a family, things that are, there's not many things that are big enough. It has to be something like a business or a family. Yeah, and I definitely saw friends of mine who had kids just immediately grow up. Not all of them, so I don't want to say it's like a panacea, and obviously if you're 17 years old listening to this, it might not be the right time, or you make sure the person's, that's the real marriage, by the way. When you have kids and so on, that's the real marriage. I've got several friends who are stuck connected to partners, male and female, who they wish they weren't their whole life, and they are stuck with them now. Even if they're divorced and move countries, you're stuck in relationship with that person. So, we do need to approach this with caution, but maybe not the degree of caution of, well, I'm going to wait till the right time and I've got money and I'm 35 and then it's all going to be fine. It might not be, especially if you're a woman. But even for the guys, I'm 43 and I'm thinking, shit, I want to have kids pretty soon. And I haven't had them tested, but I'm pretty sure my swimmers weren't the same as when I was 18, to do with the environment we're in this society. So it's like, male fertility also goes down. I mean, we might kind of have an extra 10 years on women, but it's not infinite. There might be one guy, who's like, oh yeah, I had kids when I was 60, but it's like, they tend to be the exception. A lot of infertile couples is actually the guy. So, one to know about for sure. Okay, so we covered emotional maturity, initiation, taking on responsibility, developmental stuff, which in some cases is interesting. And I think it's just rejecting the culture. The culture wants us kids, right? Think about why. Kids are infantile. They're kids of all ages, 40, 50, whatever. They're people that can be controlled. You can tell kids what to do. Right, I'm always joking with my friends who are parents, they're dictators. It's like, go to bed, they can tell someone what to do. So when people are kept as kids, they don't have that masculine, that mature agency. They don't have that sense of, I'm sovereign. You can't send me to bed. You can't send me to my room because there's a virus going around. That's what happened. Everyone got sent to their room, didn't they? A couple of years ago. And everyone was on curfew. It's ridiculous. It's like, no, the state wants you to be like children. Yeah, it keeps you infantile. So unfortunately, being on benefits and things like that, which again may have their place, can keep people dependent and infantile. And that is absolutely what corporations want, what governments want, what the system at large wants. It doesn't want us to be adults, because adults choose they want to be free. They have their own decisions. They decide what to do with their lives. Children, you just send them to do whatever. It's a nice compliant workforce, nice compliant group of consumers, and particularly people will also overconsume in a decadent society because they're trying to medicate the fact they don't have that emotional maturity and life's difficult, so they're trying to cope. So let's keep an eye on time. Got to get going. I think that's another one, is the society we're in pushes that. Big one, just looking at it historically, is dads used to be around a lot more. So boys particularly don't have that male role model. They don't have those adult models around. A lot of schools are nearly always women teachers, for example, in schools. So I see that just boys craving like masculinity. If I go to a party with some of my friends who have kids, like the single mums and stuff, like the boys are just like on me. They want to fight, they want to wrestle, they want to hang out, they want to be cheeky, and it's just, they're just longing for like that masculine contact. So boys particularly don't have so many role models of adults growing up, and women, God love them, do their best, but women can't raise men. Okay, I'm sorry, they can't raise men. So they need men for that as role models, if nothing else. So that's part of society as well, just the lack of kind of men around children. And the way society has sort of increasingly made everything like health and safety conscious, that everything's you've got to be careful of children, fill out the form if someone grazes their knee. There's some other speakers on YouTube you can see that really go into this, that it's like from childhood and then through into the workplace, this idea of the sort of safe space, that it's like, fill out a form, you've got to be very careful. Playgrounds have to be wrapped in cotton wool. This kind of health and safety orientated culture of keeping everyone safe as if they were sort of babies in And it's like, no, people are grown-ups, you know, people are grown-ups. I say to people on the initiation we do, I'm like, look, you could get hurt on this. You know, we're relatively safe and we don't think you'll die, but you could. You know, we always have a doctor there because it's can be quite hardcore. And like, look, you're almost certainly going to get bruises and scrapes and bumps, and there's a chance you could break a limb during some of the things we do. And that's your responsibility. You know, if you don't want to risk that, don't come, because there's no safe space. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. And, you know, we do risk assessments and trying to be sensible, but shit can happen if you're doing something robust. So, some people are shocked by that. They're like, what? But isn't it safe? Well, more or less, mostly safe. It's not safe. Not safe. It's safe-ish, safe enough, you know? Other people, they're excited by that. They're like, okay, wow, this is real. This is real. They understand that life isn't a safe space. And that attempt to keep people is this sort of matriarchal tyranny that wants to keep everyone as children. And that is the culture we're in. It's decadent, so people don't have the maturity because of that. But also it's this matriarchal feel of controlling everyone to keep them safe, which of course is impossible. Yeah, which again keeps people as children. So we need to look at immaturity, yes, you know, our own skills, our own taking on life, our own ability, you know, stepping up in different ways. But we also need to look at it through the lens of decadence and through the lens of culture, which obviously is what this channel's all about. So for the first one you've seen, look at some of the others. I gotta go. Catch you later.